Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to our webinar, Canada's Big Changes, Good or Bad News for International Students. My name is Saurabh. I'm from Student Direct, and I'll be your host for today. And I have a great co-panelist with me, Denis Gravelle from Devant and Kibi. Denis, welcome to the webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Oh, thank you, Saurabh. It's a pleasure to be here and to share some information for the audience.
Awesome. So let's get started, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. People are seeing this webinar on different channels across the world. So we welcome you. And the reason for doing this webinar is there have been a lot of changes in the last few months around the rules, the cost of living, the provincial attestation letters. There have been a lot of changes. So there are a lot of questions that students have in their minds, and we would try our best to give you a high-level overview of what those changes are, but more importantly, the impact of those changes on your journey to Canada, or is there an impact? Is it the good thing or a bad thing? What does immigration look like for Canada going forward? And we will have Denis talk about the labor market, the top threes, and major areas of employment that are employment areas of the future, and how Devant and Kibi support international students' journey through their time in Canada as well. So let's get started. We'll share a deck, and let's start talking about what we have in store for you. Okay, awesome. So what we have in store for you, what are the things we're going to talk about? Let's see that. But before that, let's do a quick introduction. Denis, you and me, we'll go for about 30 seconds, talk about our backgrounds. I'll start. I am Saurabh. I am the CEO and founder of Student Direct. I have more than 14 years education experience in the education industry. I worked in Canadian public institutions, working with students from more than 120 countries, helping them make Canada their chosen destination for their academic journey and their career journey in Canada as well. It's been a pleasure working with all the students, and Student Direct is new, but we're really working with a lot of institutions and students to help them get accurate, unbiased information to start their journey in Canada. So it's my pleasure to be your host today. But Denny, over to you. I'll let you introduce yourself.
Well, thank you so much, Saurabh. And again, welcome to all the participants today. My name is Denis. I have over 20 years of experience in the education sector as an associate dean at Fanshawe Humber and Seneca College. Always working in the sphere of newcomer international students, career development, workforce development, and career planning. I've been very fortunate to be able to retire from the higher ed sector and start up Devant. We put a team together because we want to address the challenges that international students face coming to Canada, but more so for those of you who are looking to for jobs here in Canada and to be better prepared in seeking the job that is commensurate with your background, your educational background, and your experience. So I come to you more so as an experienced educator, but also understanding the workforce needs and the skills required for you to get employment here in Canada and continue your career path.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danny. So we'll talk about a few things today, and I just want to give the audience an overview of what are the things we're going to talk about. But I want to say to the audience, if you have questions during the webinar, please post them in the chat, and we'll take the questions at the end. I hope our webinar would answer all the questions that you already have, but if they don't, we will take questions at the end as well. Okay, so what all are we going to talk about? We're going to give you an overview of what are the recent changes for international students. We're going to talk about that. More importantly, we're also going to talk about why have these changes taken place? What is the impact on future students? Is Canada still a good choice for international students? And then Denny is going to talk about the labor market report and how does this tie in with your future in Canada? Because the education has to tie up with outcomes, and the outcomes are directly related to what employment you get. And understanding the labor market is a crucial first step towards that. So we're going to talk about all that. So stay tuned. All right. So the changes happened, I would say, in two tranches. The first change that happened was in like December 2023. And the change was around living expenses requirements. So important to note that Canada didn't change its living expenses requirement for more than a decade, I think, at least 7 years, I believe. But in December 2023, they changed it drastically. But it was really a catch up to what was already happening on the ground. So starting Jan 2024, we're in April 2024 now, a single applicant needs to show $20,635 that they have this money as a single applicant to live in Canada. And it's like a 1 year amount that you have to show. This is directly related to something in Canada we call LICO, lower income cutoff. That amount, so 20,635 is about 75% of that amount. So for individuals applying, this is the amount of money that was updated that you have to show that you have to have to spend while you are studying here for 1 year. And this is not for studying expenses, this is more for living expenses and other things. In countries where there are GICs available for the Canadian visa application, same amount of GIC could be done, right? In countries where there are no GICs, you have to show these funds. But in countries where you have GIC, you can utilize the GIC in whichever countries that's applicable, right? So that was the first tranche, and people were, for sure, students were shocked, especially because this was announced in December and was going live in January. Students did not have a lot of time to update. Their visa applications were already in like they were about to file visa applications did not impact people who had already filed visa applications already. But still, in my opinion, it was due. Living expenses have gone up in Canada, like every place in the world. So these needs to be updated like almost like on an annual basis. But this was done after many years. But it was a big change, and students did really think that that is a lot, but it's accurate. It's giving you a more accurate picture of what it costs to stay in Canada for a year. So the second tranche, which was the bigger changes, more drastic changes, happened in January 2024. So January 22nd, I believe, is when that happened. And there were a lot of changes that were put in place, right? So I'll try to break them down a little bit so that you get a sense of what those changes are. There were caps put in place. In fact, the first thing that happened was they said new student visas will not be processed. The ones which were already in process were different, or already filed were different. New visas will not be processed until a new system is put in. But what they wanted to do was they wanted to decrease the new visa issuance by 35%. The idea is to keep the net international students in Canada the same for the next 2 years. And we'll talk about why this was important. But what they had done was they know that students already in Canada will also apply for a renewal of the study permit. So they accounted for that. So they had to decrease the new visa issuance by about 35%. They put in provincial attestation letter. They said all provinces need to provide provincial attestation letters to students applying for a visa. So this is a process students had to do before they were applying for the visa. Provincial attestation letter is new for all provinces in Canada except Quebec, which has done CAQs, I believe they're called, for many years. Provincial attestation letters can be roughly equated to CAS and other equivalent things in countries like UK, Australia, US as well. So these letters, and we're going to talk in detail about provincial attestation letters as well. That was the change. So all students needed this, and that's why the visas were not being issued for new applicants. Because this system had to be put in place. And it takes a few months to put any new systems like this in place. The third big change, private-public partnerships not eligible for postgraduate work permit. So this was a huge change there. By my estimation, about 25 to 30% of visas in Ontario especially were for these public-private partnerships. And that means those current students are not impacted, but future students can't enroll in those institutions. That was a huge change. About, I think, 14 Ontario institutions had these partnerships, and they were impacted. And of course, thousands of students were impacted by this as well. The fourth big change was the postgraduate work permit. So they said, if you're doing masters, even if it's like a shorter duration than 2 years, you will still get a 3-year work permit. Sorry, the deck says 2-year, but 3-year work permit. So what they wanted to do was they said masters are good, masters are important, they're needed academically, they're challenging. So why are students who are doing that not at the same level as students doing a 2-year program? So they changed that, and they said master students, even if it's a shorter duration than 2 years, some of the masters are 12 months, 16 months, you'll still get a longer work permit. A huge change, fifth and a really big change, was spousal work permit. So if you were applying to Canada, you were coming with a spouse, based on your study permit, they could get a work permit, right? But they said this will be ending. So this ended, I believe in January. And they said only if you're in a master's or a PhD program will your spouse be able to get a spousal work permit, right? Now, what this doesn't mean is your spouses can't get a work permit. They can once you have a work permit, right? So that was not changed. That still remains. Once students have studied and get a work permit, then spouses can still get a work permit. But this was the change that was announced, the spousal work permit change, and this has had a lot of impact in many markets because a lot of partners were coming in with their kids as well. And one partner was studying, the other partner was working. and working to support, right, like the family. So this had some impact for sure. Not in every market, because in every country, people approach international education differently. Not everyone was bringing their spouses to study with them while they were studying in Canada. So those were the changes, right? And the one of the biggest and not complicated, but most this was almost like a big puzzle for everyone, was PAL, right? And I'll try breaking down what is a PAL. I'll give you an example of an institution as well, what that process is. We'll talk about, are there exemptions from PAL as well. But provincial attestation letter, that's what PAL means, a provincial attestation letter. Now, in the next slide, I believe I'll talk about how many provincial attestation letters each province has been given. You don't need a provincial attestation letter for master's, PhD, but you need it for all other programs, postgrad and undergrad. But this is really, in essence, a way for Canadian immigration to keep track of immigration numbers by province, right? So they said, we're dividing these, we are making this province's responsibility. You get these numbers, and you can only issue these many letters. And based on those numbers, they know the visa conversion rate is whatever, 60%. So based on these letters, these percentage of students will get visas. So they get much more control over the visa numbers. That's why it was done, right? For provincial attestation letters, one of the things is institutions can define who gets a provincial attestation letter. And then the province just gives the attestation letter to anyone that the institution is asking for a provincial attestation letter for. So there are generally some conditions involved in getting a provincial attestation letter, right? But this is given by the province, but through the institution in most cases. So this slide kind of talks, we'll send you a slide deck later as well. So this kind of talks about what study permits in 2023, that by province, and study permits in 2024 projected, which is what the immigration is aiming for. And you will see not many provinces, but the bigger provinces went down substantially. So if you look at Ontario, 41% dip in Ontario, right? Substantial dip, huge dip. But remember what I was talking about earlier? In my estimation, 25 to 30% of visas in Ontario were for private-public partnerships. So really, if 25, 30% of those have gone away, really most of the dip was in the public-private partnerships, right? They were not, others have been impacted a little bit, but not to the extent everyone expected, right? They've kind of stopped public-private partnerships because the PGWP is not available now. And some other colleges have had some adjustments, but not drastic for most of the colleges in Ontario. British Columbia has gone down by 18%. So interesting thing about Ontario is when Ontario got its provincial attestation letters and they were dividing it among the institutions, 96% of the letters were given to public institutions, 4% to private, because some privates have degrees in masters, right? Those still degrees, sorry, masters don't need a PAL, but degrees, some private universities have degrees, right? They still need PAL. So that 4%. But when it was in British Columbia, the numbers have gone down by 18%, but still more than 40% of the PALs were given to private institutions in British Columbia, right? So just something to understand, something a little bit different as well. The other province of note here is Alberta. Now, Alberta had 22,000 study permits almost. It's about 24,500. They could have gotten more, but the Canadian immigration decided to cap the growth of any province at 10%. So you will see any province which has grown except Yukon and Northwest Territories, any of the territories, they've not done that, but any of the provinces have been capped at 10%. So they're like, yes, you have room to grow, but we'll grow 10% each year. So you will see Alberta, most likely next year, it'll increase even more. So it's become a big destination. I will not be surprised in 5 years, Alberta is equivalent to British Columbia in terms of the international student attraction. So this is just to give you a sense of what PAL numbers looked by province. To give you a sense of what are the exemptions like, right? What are the exemptions like? There are K to 12 students. So like there are a lot of students from different countries who come for high school in Canada. Those are exempt from PAL. They're not PAL. They don't need a provincial attestation letter. Students in Canada don't need a provincial attestation letter. Students who are in masters and PhDs don't need a provincial attestation letter. These are three exemptions, big exemptions of PAL that are most relevant for everyone to understand. Right? There aren't a lot of exceptions, only these few. Now, the interesting thing is, and this is specifically talking about Ontario because only Ontario, I believe, has done this. When Ontario divided its numbers to the institutions, it put in a few other conditions as well for institutions. It said international students will not be more than 55% of the total population. That's one. I think that's a good thing to look at. Second, it said it kind of prioritized areas with labor market needs, right? So it said programs where there is a big labor market need, health, technology, trades, education, early child education, for example. They said, you know what, we want to grow these numbers. So some institutions I know actually got more numbers than last year in Ontario, a little bit more, because they were running these programs more than others. And they were told, sure, you keep going for these programs because the province needs these skilled workers, right? And Ontario also kind of cancelled some selected 1-year postgraduate business programs. So not specialized programs at all, but generic business programs. It said to the institutions, you can't recruit for these for the next 2 years. And basically it was saying, we don't need 1-year business graduates as much in Ontario. We need financial people, we need insurance people, we need digital marketing people. Those fields, HR people, still exist within business, and your institutions have those programs. But generic 1-year business programs at postgrad level have been asked to go. Right, so Ontario has just done it a little differently than a few other provinces, but I think Ontario needed to because a lot of the dip was coming in Ontario as well. This is just a quick example of what a PAL process looks like. I've just taken an example of Humber College here. I've just taken it from their website, whatever you guys can go and look at it. But if you see, it's kind of defined what are the steps. So the step is international student applies to Humber College. Step 2, Humber reviews applications and provides LOA. Step 3, international students confirms the LOA. Not every institution has this step built in, confirmation. But step 4, international students pays $3,000 deposit. Now, deposit is different in every institution. Some institutions, it differs by country as well. So deposit might be $2,000, $3,000, whole semester fee, whatever. Step 5, Humber requests PAL for students from Ontario government. By the way, Ontario government has put in the process for PAL issuance. It's online, fairly simple for the institution to do. Students don't have to do this. Institution has to do this. And then step 6, Ontario government prepares PAL and sends to Humber. Step 7, Humber sends PAL to international students. And step 8, international student applies for study permit and includes PAL. Right? So just broadly speaking, that is the process that Humber has identified. But there are many institutions, you'll see this on their website, that they've kind of given what their process is. I just see a question, so I'll just take it right now, no problem. Will the visa rejection affect the institutes since they are issuing PAL? A very, really good question. No, I don't believe so. Because the CAS in other countries and other things that they have, once you have that, that means you're almost guaranteed to have a visa. Not guaranteed, but you have a 90, 95% success rate. Whereas in Canada, government is saying, nope, we are still banking on Canadian visa approval rate across the world is 61 point something percent. So they're saying we're still banking on 60% approval rate. In fact, they're saying to the institutions, if you really increase your approval rates too much, we might have to decrease your study permits. Almost, that's what they're saying. So it's interesting. Institutions want to increase their conversion rates, and I think everyone should and will try to increase their conversion rates a little bit, but they will not go from, if their visa approval rate is 60%, they'll not go to 80%. They sure will try to go to 65% and things like that, right? But yeah, there are no repercussions that I see right now. There is another change coming next month, which is designated learning institution. Change will not be for students per se, it'll be for institutions. We expect there'll be more that we'll get to know during that, right? There is another question, and I think I have a slide around that as well, and we'll talk about that a little later. So I hope this gives you like an overview of what the process looks like. Now, for me, the important question is, why was this done? Why were these changes instituted? Biggest reason is the cost of living really has gone through the roof in Canada as compared as it has in many, many countries across the world, right? Uh, so really, it had to be, students needed to be more aware of what they need to be prepared for before coming to Canada. So living expenses were increased. There have been a lot of media reports in Canada where students are struggling. A lot of these reports were focused on the private institutions, right? And that's why you'd see over the last 1 year, the public opinion around private institutions has shifted a little, not a little bit, a lot in Canada, right? And so that's, and coupled with a big enrollment in the private institutions, it scared the Canadian immigration a lot. There have also been reports of Canadian asylum seekers increasing 650%. And these are mostly students who are going to colleges. There are a couple of colleges which have, their numbers have gone through the roof for asylum seekers, and that's never a good sign. So that means a student coming to Canada and then filing for asylum, that's the worst outcome for the institution, for the government. They never want to see that, right? So that was another reason why this problem was happening. And of course, the other reason is politics. When there is media reports that come like that, there is politics happening on this, and there is pressure on government and opposition and things like that, which we don't need to get into. But these are major reasons why these changes happened in Canada. The impact of these changes, public-private campuses are not going to be big in the future at all because they don't have postgraduate work permit access. Programs to consider. So students need to be much more aware of the programs. And I see one of the questions is, no jobs. Someone said, are there any jobs in Canada, or there is a problem with jobs? There has been a problem with numbers in some areas, right? If there are too many international students in specific regions, specific cities, it does create a problem for sure. But that is what these measures are trying to deal with. It's trying to say, okay, you know what, it's grown too much. Let's calm it down a little bit. Privates are impacted a lot. Publics are impacted a little bit, not too much. But going forward, students should consider what programs they are considering a little more. There has been an increase in living expenses. Students need to prepare that much more carefully going forward. And you have to obtain PAL, right? Like that is the biggest change in process. Someone was asking, what are the specific documents requirements, right? The biggest requirement change is the PAL. The living expenses documents need to change, and then the PAL need to change. Those are the two biggies. And I'll share a link with you in a few minutes as well around the documentation. So is this a good thing or a bad thing, all these changes that have happened? I think it's good in medium to long run, right? If you are a student who's looking at making Canada your home, definitely this is a good thing because you're being given much more accurate information about what to expect in Canada, right? Cost of living is up everywhere, so you're being asked to prepare more. Canada still remains a welcoming country, right? Like overwhelmingly, there is still a very, very high support for immigration. Canada needs immigration. Canada cannot survive or thrive without immigration. And Canada has taken a very skilled based approach to immigration. But they are honing that approach even more going into the future, right? Canada still remains a great place for education. So public system still offers, the college system, the university system still offers the best in its class. College system offers great training skills. Academic system offers great academic ability, research skills, top notch, right? Both of them are top notch in what they do. You as a student has to be careful about what are they getting into, research about those things, and our friends at Devant and KB will talk about a lot of that as well. The other thing is the underlying for me is study plus work. This product offering that Canada has, it's unbeatable combination across the world. You can compare it with anything, any country. It doesn't. No one has that kind of combination available as good as Canada does. On top of that, the country is still overwhelmingly supportive of immigration, and that to me makes it a really good place for international students to consider Canada for their education and hopefully for working in future as well. But yes, in the short run, there are a lot of changes, lot of ambiguity. There are a lot of things like that. Living costs, PAL, PGWP changes, huge problems. So you have to be aware of it, do your research, and hopefully we help you through that process today. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Oh, yeah. We have a very interesting question, and this is the reality of it, right? Gemma says people get LMIA at $45,000. Why should they spend on study, right? And it's a very good question. One, doing it that way is completely illegal. And I'm sure people don't get caught doing that. That also happens, doesn't make it right. But I'll tell you more important than that, why you should not do that. You can get an LMIA, even if you can get an LMIA by paying someone, you are just giving away that money. If you invest that $45,000 into education in Canada, you can get 2 years of really good education. You're able to work part-time during that. And more importantly, you're able to learn skills, Canadian skills. And if you have a Canadian education on your resume, there's a huge leg up you have compared to people who don't have a Canadian education. So in short, that's what why you should look at education rather than some not so legal ways of getting to Canada. Is Canada still a good choice? Labor shortages. Uh, Canadian Federation of Independent Businesses says approximately 500,000 private sector jobs are unfilled third quarter of 2023. 500,000. Number is going up. I live in southwestern Ontario. The number is going up every quarter that we see this number, right? The population of people over 65 is going to be almost a quarter of the country. And the reason this is important is people who are retiring are paid pensions in most cases. And how do government get money for these pensions is with taxes of people who are working, younger people who are working. And if you have much more older population, they're not paying taxes, but they are getting their pensions. So there is an imbalance. Canada wants to avoid this imbalance. That's why for the last 10, 15 years, Canada has had this strong immigration, skilled workers kind of focus. Looking at the immigration numbers as well, the immigration numbers are not going up drastically now, right? I think Canada is at a very high level of immigration. Still, business and industry says it's not high enough because they need more people. But historically speaking, it's at a high level of immigration. And this will go to about this year, 500,000 immigrants will be accepted. This doesn't mean students, right? Immigrants means permanent residents will be accepted into Canada. Many of them, of course, will be students only. But this number is not expected to go up drastically in the future years. It's going to go. It's going to remain same though, stable. So that's still a lot. Canada's population is about 40 million, and it's adding about more than 10% of a. They're adding more than 10% of a country every year. That's a big number, right? And that's why the housing challenges and all that have come up. But there have been a lot of action, hopefully, that will have impact in the next 2 years. Okay, my advice of things to consider as a student going forward is, one, most importantly, choosing the program wisely. And I think when Denny talks about some of the services that are available through the event, like those are the kind of things students should consider looking at, because you need to make your own decisions. Don't let others make decisions for you when choosing programs. So choose program wisely. My second advice is talk to institutions. Any institution that you've applied to, you might have someone you've applied through, and that's okay. But there are plenty of opportunities to talk to institutions directly. Talk to institutions or their representatives directly. You will get much more unbiased information from that source. So please do that. Do your research, talk to students, do a lot of that. And that, I think, is really, really important for students to do. Understanding the reality of it. Do I get a part-time job in a week, or does it take 3 months to get it, right? And the answer is different for every city, for every skill set that you're looking at. So really, really important to look at. Now, the last is just a link, and we'll send this deck to you. It's basically Canadian Immigration has said, how does PAL document change the application process, right? So this link kind of talks about what documentations are needed and things like that. So those are the most important things, I think, for students to consider. Now, that was my part. What we're going to do is we will have Denny talk about the employment side of things, and then we're going to take a few questions at the end as well. Denny? Sorry, Denny, I think we can't hear you.
Okay, I was on mute. Thank you so much, Saurabh. This is very good information. And having worked in this sector for a long time, you are getting very good advice. Saurabh, I was blown away when I heard about LMIA being charged $45,000. That is cruel. You should not be paying for an LMIA, and get advice from both of us. If you're approached with LMIA and paying that kind of money, do not. You're flushing money down the toilet, as they say here in Canada. So that was my very first comment. My other comment is about many of my friends and relatives have recently come back due to no jobs. Well, this is the big thing here in Canada, Saurabh and participants. 80% of the jobs are not posted, meaning that you cannot apply for jobs in Canada because 80% of the jobs are not there. You will get a job based on your networking. You need to learn how to network. Those people that say, oh, I went to Canada and I couldn't find a job, they did not learn how to network, and they did not search for tools that will help you find a job. So if we can go to the next slide, I'll just tell you a little bit about Devant and Kibbe. We are we are the same organization with two different products. One is it's called a white label web portal that institutions use to help international students with finding a job here in Canada. So if you register with a school like say Humber or Centennial, they have the services provided by us to help you stay, work, and succeed in Canada. We also have our Kibbe product, and that is something you can access today. It is at no cost. It is a iOS or Android app, and it allows you to search for jobs based on geographic location. And Saurabh, and I'm sure Saurabh, you can vouch for me. When you're coming to Canada and you say, I want to find a job in Sudbury. Well, where is Sudbury, and where are the jobs in Sudbury? So our app is like going into Google Maps, and you're searching for jobs based on a map. So we will put the link in the chat for you to download the app, and the app is 100% free, no cost, and you are able to search for jobs. But you need to understand that 80% of the jobs in Canada are not going to be found on the web. You will have to network, and that's where we come into play. We will help you with your networking. Next slide. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much. So how do we do this? Well, we provide AI-driven tools to create your resume, your cover letter, your elevator pitch, so that you will now understand and be able to create those assets that you need to find a job. We have free weekly events. You are invited to attend those events, and this will help you find a job in Canada. We also have job boards, so that you can find a job within Canada. We have a newsletter. We have a masterclass. We also provide a lot of networking events so that you can find a job. So whether you're looking for a part-time job, so when you come to Canada, you will have a part-time job, or you're looking for a co-op position. We have all of those within our platform and within the app. Or when you graduate, we have an alumni program. Next slide. Just to give you an idea of what the Kibbe app looks like, it's very much like going to Google Maps, but it's Google Maps for jobs, so that you can search for jobs where you're going to school, and close to public transit, close to some services, close to places of worship. Next slide. And we also provide detailed labor market information based on a report that we put out every quarter. Next slide. And you will be able to get a free copy of our latest labor market report, and we will put the link into the chat, where you can click on the link and you can download our latest report about where the jobs are in Canada. My final slide, because I would like to answer questions. This is our top 3 list. So the best provinces and cities, of course, Ontario, British Columbia, and Alberta. And the top 3 cities will be Toronto, Vancouver, and Calgary. And the skills, the best skills that employers are looking for are project management skills, marketing skills, and financial skills. Why these 3 skills? Because 90% of the companies in Canada are small companies. They're called SMEs, small medium enterprises. So Canada is made up of a lot of smaller companies, but they are the ones looking for employees, and they're looking for project management skills because they are developing products. They're looking for marketing skills because they're developing a product and they need to market. They need financial skills because they want to not only market their product here in Canada, but also overseas. The 3 soft skills, these are skills that are your hard skills, are what you go to school for. Soft skills are what you provide to the employer, and the employer is looking for communication skills. So that's your English. Are you able to connect with customers? So customer service, your management skills and leadership skills. And the 3 software skills that employers are looking for: Office, absolutely. Excel is the number one software skills employers are looking for. SQL and Python if you're going into the data space. And the best industries and occupations that, based on our latest report, would be, of course, in the healthcare field, in the advertising, marketing, public relations, and finance and commercial banking. And these are the top titles that employers, the top titles: project managers, nursing, healthcare, financial analysts, and the employers, TD Bank, the government of Saskatchewan, and the Bank of Montreal. So I believe that's the end of my slide deck. It's a lot of information to provide to you at this time. However, that's why I am here, and I highly recommend that you connect with us through Kibbe or through our website. Over to you, Saurabh. Saurabh, are you there?
Hi. Yes.
There you are.
Thank you so much, Danny, for that quick overview of your app as well as the opportunities that are there. I was very interested to look at, let me see if I can go to the deck again to talk about, the top soft skills, the top skills that are required as well. These are the kind of things students have to search about, right? These are the kind of things before making your program decisions. Like, doing this after you've done your programs will still help you, but doing it even before you've chosen your program will be the most beneficial. So I can't recommend strongly enough for students to do this research. Listen to all of us, listen to me, listen to Denny, listen to other experts, but do your research, right? That's always check and recheck. So that's one thing that I'll say as well. Danny, thank you so much for that overview. And I love the locational abilities of the Kibbe app. I think that's tremendous because really real time, that's what students are looking for as well. Okay, let's take a couple of questions, Danny. Let's take from Ivan Sound, if we can have that question on the screen. I think that's a really good question. I'll just wait a few seconds while the question is put on the screen. So the question is, as a new student, I would not have network, and I can't even survive for a long time without having jobs. So what's your advice, right? And Danny, as you were saying, networking, single most important thing. It always blows my mind whenever you've said, I've heard you say this many times now, but every time you say this, 80% of the jobs are not posted, right? Like, so it's about how many people you know or how many people know you, right? That's what this is
It's how
about.
many people know you. It's not how many people you know, but it's how many people know you. So LinkedIn is your best tool in Canada. The majority of employers are using LinkedIn to recruit because there's the commercial, there's a product, the consumer product of LinkedIn that you're familiar with, but there's also a commercial side of LinkedIn where recruiters and they're called talent acquisition people, HR people, they can go through the back end and they can start looking for talent through LinkedIn, and it's a lot easier. It's like them going to Google and saying, these are the skills I'm looking for. This is the educational requirement, and they can do a search. And if you're not on LinkedIn or you don't have a good LinkedIn profile, it will be impossible for these HR talent acquisition recruiters to find you. So that's number one. Number two, the best source of building your network is through your professors. All your professors are working in industry, and you need to not only attend classes, but also talk to your teachers after class and say, how did you get into the field? Are there events that are coming up that I can attend? You'd be surprised at how many associations provide a student membership, and it allows you to attend their events. So those are the ones that are kind of what we call the low-hanging fruit. Those are things that are there that international students are not aware of.
Absolutely. Great advice, Danny. I'll also say, and Ivan, your question is more about the, like, as soon as you arrive, right? And I know international students want employment really quickly. That's what they're looking for part-time employment. And the the advice I have for that is you have to cold call. You have to go to 100 places to talk to them, drop in your resume. You drop in resumes for part-time jobs, right? And that's the one thing that a lot of students are not generally aware of. And it needs to be a simple resume. It doesn't need
Mm,
to, if you have, they don't really worry about that, but they want to look at, if you're applying to a retail company, have you worked in a retail organization earlier, right? That those are the kind of things that they want to know about. But you have to cold call, you have to go out, you have to talk to people, you have to look at job posts, you have to volunteer as well, because sure, you can get a job in a restaurant or at a grocery store or whatever, but they might give you a few hours to start with. They also want to check you out, what your skills you have, right? But if there are other opportunities, for example, let's say in the student union of the college or university you're studying in, there are volunteering opportunities. Do that volunteering, because next semester that might lead to a job as well for you,
mhm.
right? So invest in volunteering opportunities as well is what I'd like to say. To We have a lot of questions
It,
coming in, Denny.
yeah, and it's not only volunteering, but it's also attending. A lot of the schools have clubs, right, Saurabh? They have these
Yes,
clubs. It is
absolutely.
good for you to go to these clubs because one is that you're going to be immersed in Canadian culture. Two, you're going to make Canadian friends. Three, you're going to understand some of the, like when I say low hanging fruit. You know, to you, you may not know what that is, but in Canada we use a lot of idioms, right, Saurabh?
Yes.
And so it allows you to learn some of those sayings that we have in Canada. And three, they have a network. They have a network, and I always say your network is your net worth,
Exactly.
right? And so volunteering is one. The other thing the Kibbe app does is it allows you to search for those part-time jobs close to where you're living. There's nothing worse than coming to Toronto. You find a part-time job. You're going to Centennial. The part-time job that you want is up in Markham. Well, to go to Markham is going to take you an hour and a half, depending on transit. So that's the advantage of the Kibbe app. So Rob, you've made some very good points. So the networking, it takes work, but networking is going to get you to where you want to be.
Okay, awesome. Let's take Rod's question. And Rod's question is about the living expenses and the wage rates. I'll wait for a few seconds while the question is online. Thank you. So Rod's question is, as living expenses have increased, what do you think the government will increase the minimum wages for international students? And I can say, actually, the wage rates have gone up in many provinces. Give you an example of Ontario. Just I think last week, it's like a few weeks ago, it's gone up again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It used to be at $14, $15, went to 16.55. Now it's $17.2. So the wage rates
Mm-hmm.
have gone up, but the wage rates don't go up for international students or domestic students. Wage
No.
rates just go up in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it has, and the 20-hour work limit still remains. I think it's a healthy limit. I like limits because when you are in Canada, your number one responsibility is to study, because
Mm-hmm.
because it is the ethical thing to do, but also it's the right thing to do for the long term. If you invest in education, networking, it will give you a much better return on investment in a year or 2 years, right? However, there are talks that I know about increasing the 20-hour limit, changing the 20-hour limit as well. So government is aware that there are changes that might be required. However, as soon as that is announced, we will of course update that.
Mm-hmm.
But the wage rate specifically has gone up. I don't know, Denny, if you had something to add.
Yeah, the government will not increase the minimum wages for international students. That's a non-starter. But our what they call the part-time rate has actually increased across the country, and your priority should be studying. That's why the government gives you a study permit. But while you're studying, that's where you need to build your network. No, it's good to spend all your time studying, but do those things to build your network, because that's where you're going to find opportunities, because your network is your net worth.
Absolutely. Okay, so let's take Rod. I hope that answered your question. Let's take the question from Paloma, which is about PG versus masters, I think, and that's a really burning topic right now. So I'll wait for a few seconds as the question is put on the screen, and I'll read out the question as soon as it's on the screen.
And I'd like to mention the minimum wage. It's Ontario sets its minimum wage, so whether you're in Toronto or you're up in Sudbury, it's the same wage. So it doesn't matter where you are in the country. Each province will set the minimum wage, and it's almost the same across Canada.
Okay. All right. So Paloma's question is, I have taken admission in PG courses as I'm not eligible for masters, but I want to come with my spouse. What's the way? Good question, Paloma. And absolutely, masters have different kind of requirements for sure. So it's not possible that every student would have eligibility to go into masters. And PG programs are really good programs if you are in the right program, which gives you the skill sets that you need. Now, you can't come with your spouse on a work permit. There are no restrictions to come on your with your spouse on a visitor permit. So what that means is your spouse will not be able to work in Canada. That's what not having a work permit means. There are no restrictions that you can't bring your spouse. However, as I say this, I also know that in every country, the visa application rules are the same, practices are different as well. So depending on what country you are in, it might, some countries visa officers don't I would not say encourage, but they're hesitant giving out visitor permits unless you've started your education. So in many cases, students do a semester and then they apply for a visitor permit for their spouse. But yeah, the point of clarification in this is you can come with your spouse on a visitor visa. They can't come on a work visa. Okay, so that is the change that has been implemented. So coming is not restricted; it's just on what permit they come on. Okay, looking at the next questions. Okay, can we have Diana Thrill's question, please, on the screen? Good question. So Diana says, I'm currently in Canada studying in a government institution, so a public institution, which is not good, and it's a one-year course. Should I change the course right now, or should I look for next year? So now there are a couple of ways of reading this question. I don't know if the institution you are in is not good, or the program that you are in is not good. I'm not sure, because public institutions in Canada, the credentials are standardized to a big extent. For example, if you are in Alberta, any province that you're doing a program in, let's say in project management, the content will be very, very, very similar, because provincially, the ministry approves all the topics that go into that program, right? So as long as it's a public institution, the content is good. One-year program per se is not a problem, because one-year program by itself will give you a one-year work permit. But if you doing a one-year program, you can do another one-year program in the same institution or another institution, and then you can be eligible for up to 3 years work permit. So that in itself is not a restriction or a bad thing per se. Yes, if you're not happy with the program, first talk to your advisors in the college. If you're not happy with the outcomes, or for example, you maybe chose the wrong program, talk to your institution for that. Look for options within the institution first, if the institution is okay. But if not, changing has some challenges associated with it, because you have to tell immigration that you're now changing the program, changing the institution. Program changing is not that big a problem. You still have to inform immigration, but it's simple. But if you're changing institutions, in some cases, depending on your scenario, a new permit might be required as well. So it's a little more tricky than that. However, overall, I would say a one-year program per se is not not really the challenge. It's about getting the skills. And if you're worried about the work permit duration, you can always add on a second 1 year program.
Now, Saurabh, I'd like to answer the question from Diana because I'll just read it out. Is can a student contact us for help in part-time, full-time jobs, and what are the charges? We do not charge for you to find a job. We do this through the app because really you have an app. Download the Kibbe app, and you can search for jobs there, and the jobs are there. And the other thing the app does is that it translates the job into 17 different languages. So if you want to look at the job in Urdu, for example, then you can look at the job posting. So that's one thing. The other one is that we have free events every month. Like we did put a link, but we have a career cafe. We have immigration Q&A with an immigration lawyer. We have employer insights. So those are free events that, why pay somebody to do work that is available at no cost to you? So that's how I'd like to answer that question, Diana. Very good question. Do we charge? No, we don't charge. We provide you the tools, and we provide you the events. Now you need to do the work. And the big advantage of doing a two-year program versus a 1-year program, in my own opinion, it allows you to build your network. It gives you 2 years to build a network with not only the students in the class, joining clubs, volunteering, but also your professors.
Fantastic. That's great advice, Danny. Can I have Gail's question on the screen, please? Gail Kirsten is asking about what's the biggest impact of the financial requirements on the timeline for obtaining a Canadian student visa? Really good question, Gail. Now, the impact of the financial requirements is the students need more time in most cases to have those finances ready, right? And when you're applying for a visa, you also need to not need to, but would like to show that you've had those resources with you for some time. So even if you're, for example, selling off an asset and having those resources, or showing that asset, you need more time. If it was $10,000, you need less time to kind of gather the documentation around it. If it's $20,000, you just need a little more time. With GIC, it's simpler. If you're in a country which has GICs for Canada, you just pay that amount in a few days, you get the certificate. But again, gathering those resources, the additional time is just gathering those resources, right? So that's really, it's your individual situation. And you might say, it's too much now. Maybe I'll not go to Canada. And that's totally fine. But this way you have a more realistic expectation of what to expect when you get to Canada in terms of living expenses. And the bottom line for me out of all these changes is also, Denny, that Canada also doesn't want its international students to not be successful. It rather have lesser students and have all of them be successful than have 20% more and then have 20% not be successful. That's the way the Canadian, the government, the industry, and everyone, institutions, that's the way everyone thinks about that too. So
and you're so right, Saurabh, because they're saying we're investing in you coming to Canada, and we want you to stay to Canada, and we'd rather bring in the best, the ones that have a very good attitude, and the ones that are going to be successful, so that they can stay, work, and succeed.
Absolutely. Danny, there is a question for you, and they're asking: are the jobs applied directly on your website on Devant?
No, they're in the Kibbe app.
Oh, in the Kibbe app. So you apply right on the app, right?
Yeah, you apply, and and again, it's like Google Maps. It's a Google Maps for job search.
Okay. And so we have another question from Alessandra. Alessandra is asking, can you please recommend some top colleges and universities for Asians? It's a very interesting question, Alessandra. But I think top, this word, I honestly don't like, because what is top institution? Honestly, I might not get admission in, or might not be the right fit for me, right? So I think it is really about the fit. The top ranked institutions, you can just look up McLean's and you'll get what the top ranked institutions in Canada are, at least universities, right? but it is much more complicated than that. I think when we ask that question, we might simplify it. Let's say you want to learn agriculture skills, right? Agriculture sciences. And let's say University of Toronto is the best university in Canada. It might not be the best university in Canada for agriculture sciences, right? So you have to look at much more deeply what your area of interest is. When you're talking computer sciences, I know Waterloo and University of British Columbia are the gold standards for it, but it differs. Another example I'll give you in colleges, when you talk about animation, Sheridan College becomes the default choice of students doing animation because it has made this name on animation for the last 20 years or so, right? So it really depends on what you are looking for. It also depends on what location you want to go to, in my opinion, because Toronto, Vancouver, Montreal are awesome cities. Not everyone wants to be in the biggest city in Canada, right? And there are great things that come with it. There are some challenges that come with it too. Some students want more mid-sized cities. Some people that I've known have told me the best decision that they made was going to a really, really small city for their institution because they were good and they believed in themselves, and that made them stand out in that crowd a lot, right? So but it's a different answer, I think, for everyone. um, in terms of where do most Asians go right now, the answer is University of Toronto, University of British Columbia. Those are where most of the Asian students in Canada study in. And when I say Asian, I'm not really including South Asia in it, because when you include South Asia, then I think the simplest answer is I believe Conestoga College is the biggest destination for Asian students, including South Asia. So there are multiple ways of looking at your question, but I tried answering it from different perspectives. Denny, any perspectives on that?
No, I believe your answer is perfect. Yeah.
We have another question from Sarolin, and the question is, can I work part-time and get PGWP if I choose private college? Now, the part-time work, actually, I'm not sure if the part-time work is allowed in private colleges. What private colleges are allowed, I know, is co-op work permit. So what happens in private colleges most of the time is the programs are built in with academics and then a 1 year co-op, right? And then maybe another academic semester. And the co-op is allowed in private institutions, but you cannot get a postgraduate work permit now if you are in a public-private partnership. But if you're in a master's or a degree program, it's different, right? So this is mostly for the postgraduate 1 year, 2 year programs. You can't really get a PGWP in private colleges. In Ontario, it was possible. In Quebec, it was possible earlier. Quebec changed that, I believe, last year, and then now it's changed for everyone. Even if it's a private-public partnership, you don't get a PGWP. I hope that answered the question. There is a question from John, and the question is about, I'll see if the question can be put on screen. The latest question from John. Yeah, I'm currently working right now, but I really want to study in Canada in the future, although I'm not sure when. That's okay, John. I'd like to ask, is there an expiration date for filing a student visa in Canada? Really good question. And there are a couple of ways of looking at it. When you file your visa, they're going to give you a visa for the duration of your program, and they might give you a month to 3 months additional to that, right? But there is no restriction filing visas too far before your study time. But expiration is really, they say expiration is generally the end of program, or if your, let's say, passport is expiring, that will be your expiration. But generally, it's the end of program plus a few months here and there to give you time to apply for a postgraduate work permit. So that's really what expiration is generally given on the student visas in Canada. All right. I think, Danny, we've done it. We've come to the end of the questions today. Yeah, I love
A
that.
lot of very good questions, and there's three things to, if I were to summarize. One is talk to the experts,
Mhm.
and we are here because we value we want to help. We will not charge you $45,000 for advice. So we are here because we genuinely want to help you too. Your network is your net worth, and you need to. That's how you're going to get the job. And three, leverage the tools that are available. Please attend our free webinars. Please come download the Kibbe app. Please reach out to us. Reach out to Student Direct. They are an excellent organization to provide you just in time and very good advice so that you make a good decision.
Thank you, Danny. I would thank everyone for joining us. Danny, thank you so much for your time this morning. What I would ask my team is to put, I think Devant's app has been put in the chat, I see. But please put the Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn channels for Student Direct as well, so that you guys can follow us on LinkedIn as well. Um, and I thank you all for your time today. We've come to the end of our questions, but there is a question I see which is a very relevant question. So I'm kind of um, uh, forced to take that question. And the question is from Gail, and this will be the last question we take today. How difficult is it to find affordable housing near Canadian universities or colleges, especially for students from abroad? Really good question, Gail. Really relevant question. It takes a lot of time. So there is no way of saying this. It's not easy, right? So I worked in institutions for a long time. There was a time when you come in a week, not even week, 3 days before the classes start. Next day you can have a room to rent, and you're set to go. That's not the case anymore at all. You have to start your research months in advance, and there are some scams as well. So don't transfer money unless someone you know is involved or you've looked at the place and things like that. So just keep that and always have a trail of money that you're giving to anyone. But the good thing I'll say is a lot of the institutions have bus passes available for their students. So earlier, if you were living right next to the campus, now with your budget and affordability, you might live 20, 30 minutes away from the campus. But that's okay. There, as long as you have a bus pass and you have accessibility, um, doing that is important. There are a lot of tools you can use. A lot of students use Kijiji, they use Facebook Marketplace to kind of find those campuses. College campuses, university campuses have their own residences as well. Look at that, because at years ago for international students they used to be very unaffordable. Now they're not that unaffordable because they're very similar to the prices you get outside as well. So if you can consider that, look at that too. And I think that that is my advice for finding accommodation. Start early, right? Is my advice. And a lot of new student housing will be built in the next 2 years. There's no ifs and buts about it. There is a lot of funding that is going into it. It will be done, but because it's housing, it can't happen in 3 months or 6 months. It takes a few years for you to see it. So start early is my advice. Okay. I think we'll stop there. Danny, thank you so much, Danny, for your time today. We will put our LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram channels, YouTube channels on the chat. Please, everyone, take time to follow us. Take time to download the Kibbe app, and that Danny has provided a link for. And I think that'll be really, really helpful. Thank you so much for joining us today. Keep tuned for future webinars. We'll be having regular webinars at Student Direct. And Danny, thank you again for joining us today.
No, I really appreciate the opportunity, and also I'd like to thank the participants for taking the time to be here because you're doing the right thing. Because if you need to invest your time into not only your education but your career goals and your aspirations.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Danny. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day ahead. Take care.